They said I was crazy. That at 73, a woman should be knitting blankets for her grandchildren, watching soap operas on TV, and waiting for Sunday visits. They said I'd lost my mind when I sold the house where I'd lived for 40 years, given away almost everything I owned, and bought an old van. But you know what? That was the first truly personal decision I ever made in my entire life. And today, 3 years later, I can say with absolute certainty, it was the best choice I ever made. My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Maggie. And this is the story of how, at 73, I finally learned how to live. The morning began like any other that fall in 2019. I was in the kitchen of my home in Ohio, preparing the breakfast that no one else ate with me. My husband Harold had passed away 3 years earlier, a victim of a heart attack. The 50 years we spent together weren't bad, but they weren't exactly mine either. They were the years a good wife should have, taking care of the house, raising the children, supporting her husband, smiling at church celebrations. That particular morning, I looked out the kitchen window and saw my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, also a widow, also alone, sitting on her porch as she did every day. She was 79 years old, and that had been her routine for over a decade, sitting, waiting, existing. And suddenly, like a bolt of lightning across the gray Ohio sky, I realized that this was my future. I would become Mrs. Patterson. I would wake up, have coffee, clean an empty house, watch TV, wait for the weekly calls from her always busy children, and that would be how my days would be until the end. My heart raced. Not from fear of death, but from fear of never having truly lived. I dropped my coffee mug in the sink. I sat down at the kitchen table and for the first time in decades asked myself a question I'd forgotten to ask. Maggie, what do you want to do? The answer came instantly, as if I had been waiting 73 years to be freed. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see real mountains, not just those on postcards. I wanted to wake up in different places, meet different people, feel alive, and not just surviving. When I told my daughter Susan about my plan, I thought she was going to have a meltdown right there in my living room. Mom, you can't be serious. You're 73 years old. Exactly, I replied calmly, surprised by my own firmness. I'm 73 years old, and I have no idea how many I have left. I might have 3, I might have 30. But I'm not going to spend the ones I have left waiting for life to end. But traveling alone, in a van? Mom, what if you get sick? What if something goes wrong? What about your safety? Her brother, Michael, was even more blunt. Mom, this is ridiculous. Women your age don't do these things. What will people say? And there it was. What people are going to say. The phrase that had governed my entire life. The phrase that made me give up on art school at 18 because, good, girls get married and have children. The phrase that made me swallow my dreams one by one, smiling politely as they died in my throat. Frankly, darling, I replied, I don't care anymore what people will say. The next few months were an emotional roller coaster. I put the house up for sale, which caused a scandal in the neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson cried on my shoulder, saying I was her only true friend. My children tried everything from making me see a psychologist, who, ironically, said I seemed more lucid than ever, to threatening legal guardianship. But I had made my decision. I found my van through an online ad. It was a worn-out white 2005 Ford Transit that had belonged to a retired electrician. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid. I paid $7,000 for it, a bargain considering the house had sold for $250,000. With the help of a local carpenter, who thought my project was absolutely wonderful, we converted the interior of the van. We installed a folding bed, small cupboards, a battery-powered mini-fridge, a portable camping stove, and bookshelves. It wasn't House on the Prairie, but it was mine. I painted wildflowers on the interior walls. I sewed colorful curtains. I bought comfortable pillows. I donated most of my belongings. 50 years of accumulation went to thrift stores, churches, and relatives. I kept only the essentials: clothes for all seasons, some beloved books, my wedding photo. After all, Harold was an important part of my story. Photo albums of my children, and a box of memories. The feeling of lightness was indescribable. Every item I donated, every piece of furniture that went out the door was like lifting a weight off my shoulders. I discovered that I didn't need a 4-bedroom house to be happy. I didn't need 2 living rooms, 3 bathrooms, and an attic full of things I would never use again. In March 2020, a week before the world turned upside down with the pandemic, I left. My initial destination was vague: west. I wanted to see the Rocky Mountains. I wanted to see the Pacific Ocean. I simply wanted to see. The first few days were terrifying, driving that huge van on the roads, finding places to park at night, using public restrooms, cooking on a tiny stove. Everything was new and challenging. I got lost more times than I can count. Once, I tried to park at a campground and almost crashed the van into a tree while a group of young campers watched, clearly worried that Grandma was going to cause an accident. But something magical happened in those first few days. I began to feel alive. I woke up whenever I wanted. If I wanted coffee at 5 in the morning, I had coffee at 5 in the morning. If I wanted to lie in bed reading until noon, that's exactly what I did. Nobody needed me. Nobody expected anything from me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's neighbor. I was just Maggie. The first great lesson I learned was in Colorado. I had parked the van near a viewpoint in the Rocky Mountains and woke up to the sunrise, painting the peaks gold and pink. I got out of the van barefoot, still in my pajamas, and cried. I cried with joy, with relief, with gratitude. At 73 years old, I was finally seeing the mountains I had dreamed of seeing my whole life. A young couple hiking passed by me. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" the young woman asked, concerned. "Everything is perfect," I replied, smiling through my tears. "I'm just alive." After Colorado, I went to Utah. I camped near Arches National Park and hiked trails that people half my age considered difficult. Yes, I stopped to rest frequently. Yes, it took twice as long. But I made it, and every red stone arch I saw was a personal achievement. In Nevada, I met a group of nomads, people who, like me, lived in vans, trailers, and motorhomes. They were of all ages: young adventurers, families raising children on the road, retirees, seeking freedom. I was greeted with curiosity and admiration. "You are an inspiration," a woman in her 40s told me. "I'm so afraid to do that, to give it all up, and you've already done it at 73. "Honey," I replied, "that's exactly the point. Don't wait until you're 73. I've wasted decades being what others expected me to be. Start now." I'm not going to lie and say that everything was easy and wonderful. There were some very difficult moments. The pandemic hit, and suddenly the world shut down. Campgrounds closed. Parks closed. I was in Arizona when it all started, and I was stuck for months in a Walmart parking lot, along with other nomads in the same situation. It was scary and lonely. My children begged me to go back to Ohio, to stay with one of them until this passes. But something stubborn in me refused. I had started this journey, and I wasn't going to give up at the first sign of trouble. During those strange months, I established a routine. I would wake up, exercise, beside the van, make coffee, read and write in my journal. I talked to other nomads from a safe distance. We learned to look out for each other. When my van had engine trouble, a man named Earl, who had lived in a trailer for 15 years, helped me fix it. When Earl got sick, I made soup for him. I discovered that even in the most difficult moments, there was beauty in having chosen that life. There were other challenges, too. Once I got sick in Utah with a terrible kidney infection. I drove to the nearest hospital, got treated, and drove back to the van. Yes, it was scary doing that alone. But it also showed me that I was stronger than I thought. There was the harsh winter I spent in New Mexico, when temperatures dropped below freezing and I woke up shivering even with 3 blankets. There was the time I crashed the van while parallel parking. Yes, even at 76, I'm still not good at parallel parking. There were moments of profound loneliness when I longed for a meaningful conversation with someone who truly knew me. But for every difficult moment, there were 10 moments of pure magic. Alone on the road, I began to rediscover parts of myself that I had buried decades ago. I remembered that I loved to draw. When I was young, before I got married, I drew constantly. So, at a craft store in Oregon, I bought a sketchbook and colored pencils. I started drawing the landscapes I saw: mountains, deserts, oceans, ancient trees. They weren't masterpieces, but they were mine, and that mattered. I discovered I loved photography. I bought a simple digital camera and started capturing the places I went. I created an Instagram account, yes, at 74 years old, and started posting photos. To my surprise, people started following. Not thousands, but a few hundred. People who told me I inspired them. People who had their own dormant dreams. A follower wrote to me, "My grandmother died at 78 without ever having seen the ocean, even though it was her dream. She always said, when we have money, when the grandchildren grow up, when the time is right." The right time never came. Seeing you doing this makes me cry with joy and sadness at the same time. I also started writing stories about my life, reflections on aging, on freedom, on it never being too late. Writing became my way of processing all that transformation. One of the greatest blessings of this journey has been the people I've met along the way. In Montana, I met an Amish family selling produce at a roadside market. The matriarch, a woman named Rebecca, invited me to dinner. We spent an evening talking about life, faith, and choices. Despite our lives being completely different, we found common ground in the idea that a simple life can be a fulfilling life. In California, I met a 25-year-old woman named Emma who was traveling after recovering from cancer. "I almost died without having lived," she told me. "You give me hope that even if I live to be 70, there will still be time for adventures." "Darling," I replied, "don't wait until you're 70. Live now." In Texas, I met a war veteran who had been living in his van for 10 years. He taught me how to fix things, how to be self-sufficient, how to respect nature. In return, I taught him how to make my family's famous pecan pie. Each person was a story, a lesson, a gift. It took time, but my children eventually began to understand. Susan visited me in Arizona a year after I left. I spent 3 days showing her my life on the I road. We hiked together, cooked together in the tiny van, and watched the sunset in the desert. On the last day, she cried and hugged me tightly. "Mom, you were right. I saw you as fragile, as someone who needed to be protected. But you were never fragile. You were just trapped." "And now I am free," I concluded. Michael took longer, but last year he called me. "Mom, I'm unhappy in my job. I always have been. But I keep going because it's what's expected of me, because it's safe, because it's responsible. Watching you has made me question everything." "So question," I told him. "Question, explore, live. You're only 45 years old. Imagine what you can do with the time you have left." Today my children support me. They still worry, of course, but there's respect now. There's admiration. And I dare say, perhaps even a little healthy envy. I discovered that living on the road taught me to appreciate the seasons in a whole new way. In spring, I travel north, following the wildflowers as they bloom. In summer, I go to the mountains where the air is fresh. In autumn, I head down to see the leaves change color in New England. In winter, I go south to the warmth of Arizona or New Mexico. My life now follows the rhythms of nature, not the artificial rhythms of society. There is no Monday that I dread. There are no special weekends. Each day is its own gift. Waking up to birdsong instead of an alarm clock. Falling asleep, gazing at the stars through the van window. Bathing in natural springs. Cooking over a campfire. These are simple pleasures that are worth more than any luxury I had in my old life. Society has many stories about what it means to grow old, especially for women. We are supposed to become invisible, discreet, quiet. We are supposed to accept our role as grandmothers, caregivers, guardians of the family. We are supposed to give up adventures, dreams, desires. But I discovered that all of that is a lie. At 76, my current age, I am more adventurous than I was. At 26, I am braver at 76 than I was at 46. I am more truly myself than I have ever been in my entire previous life. Yes, my body isn't what it used to be. My joints ache on cold mornings. My skin is wrinkled. My hair is white. But these physical marks don't define who I am. They are merely the shell in which my spirit dwells. And my spirit is more alive than ever. I met people on the road who are 80, 85, even 90 years old, still exploring, still living. They taught me that age is, to a large extent, an attitude. If you believe you're too old for something, then you are. But if you believe there's still life to be lived, adventures to be had, then age is just a number. Over the years, I've discovered places that have touched my soul in profound ways. The Grand Canyon at sunrise, so vast and ancient that it makes our problems seem insignificant. The redwood forests of California, trees so tall and old that you feel the presence of something sacred. The beaches of Oregon, wild, rocky, with roaring waves. The deserts of New Mexico, silent, spacious, perfect for reflection. But my absolute favorite place is a small clearing in Wyoming near Yellowstone. It has no name. It's not on tourist maps. I discovered it by chance when I got lost, something that happens regularly. It's just a clearing surrounded by pine trees, with a stream running nearby and a view of the mountains in the distance. I go back there every summer. I park my van under the trees, open the back doors, sit in my folding chair, and simply exist. I read, draw, think, sleep. Sometimes I stay there for days without seeing another person. And in that silence, I find something precious. Peace. My life in the van taught me to appreciate things that I previously took for granted. A hot shower at a campground after days of using wet wipes, a washing machine, a real bed in a cheap motel when my body needs a break, a hot meal at a roadside diner, Wi-Fi that actually works, a conversation with a friendly stranger. These simple things have become luxuries, and I appreciate them immensely more than I appreciated the luxuries of my former life. The Persian rug I had in the living room, the new car Harold bought, the big screen TV. None of that brought me a tenth of the joy I feel when I find a perfect parking spot with a beautiful view. I learned that happiness is not in the things we possess, but in the experiences we live and the freedom we feel. I'm not going to pretend I don't. Have fears. I have many. I'm afraid of becoming seriously ill far from any help. I'm afraid the van will break down in a remote place. I'm afraid of running out of money. My pension is modest. I'm afraid of becoming unable to drive and having to give up this life. But I realized something important. I had fears in my old life too. I was afraid of growing old alone in that big house. I was afraid of dying without having lived. I was afraid of looking back and seeing a lifetime of missed opportunities. So, I chose my fears. I prefer to be afraid while doing something bold than to be afraid while doing nothing. Every morning when I wake up, there's a moment of pure gratitude. Another day, another chance to see something new, to learn something, to be alive. Many people stop me and say, "I would love to do what you do, but..." And then come the excuses. Too old, too many responsibilities, too scary, too late. Here's what I've learned. There will always be reasons not to do something. The list of buts never ends. If you wait for the perfect moment, you'll wait forever. I'm not saying everyone should sell their houses and live in vans. That's my journey, not necessarily yours. But I am saying you shouldn't let other people's shoulds dictate your life. Ask yourself, if I only had 1 year to live, what would I do differently? And then ask, why not start doing it now? You don't need to make drastic changes overnight. Start small. Take that trip you've always put off. Sign up for that course. Have that difficult conversation. Take that first step. What if people say you're crazy, irresponsible, or inappropriate for your age or situation? Smile politely and do it anyway. I don't know how much longer I'll do this. Maybe another 5 years, maybe another 10. Maybe my body will decide it's time to stop tomorrow. I have no control over it. What I know is that when the time comes to stop, I will have no regrets. I will have lived, truly lived. Eventually, I might need a permanent place to live again. Maybe a small apartment in some city where I can park my van and use it for shorter trips. Or maybe my children will eventually convince me to live closer to them. But if and when that day comes, it will be my choice, not an imposition. And I will carry with me the memories of these years, the mountains I climbed, the oceans I saw, the people I met, the version of myself I discovered. If there's one thing I want people to understand from my story, it's this. It's never too late to change your life. Society tells us there's a time for everything. A time for adventure when we're young, a time for responsibility when we're middle-aged, a time for rest when we're old. But that's just one narrative among many possible ones. You can start a new career at 50. You can learn a new language at 60. You can travel the world at 70. You can fall in love at 80. You can reinvent yourself at any time. I lived 73 years before this journey began. They were important years. I raised wonderful children, had a decent marriage, and made lasting friendships. I don't erase or devalue those years. But these last 3 years have been mine in a way that the others never were. And if I were to die tomorrow, I would die complete. I look at Mrs. Patterson, my former neighbor, who still lives in Ohio, still sitting on her porch, still waiting. I feel sadness and gratitude. Sadness because she never took the leap. Gratitude because I did. Each of us has a road ahead of us. The question is not whether we are brave enough to travel it, but whether we will give ourselves permission to try. I gave myself that permission at age 73. When will you give it to me? This is my story. This is my truth. At 76 years old, living in an old van, with $1,000 in the bank and $1 million worth of memories in my heart, I am the richest woman I know. Not because I have a lot, but because I am finally free. And I hope, from the bottom of my heart, that my story inspires you to seek your own freedom, whatever that may be, because we all deserve to live before we die. We all deserve to be truly ourselves. So here I am, Maggie, at 76 years old, driving my van across the roads of America, finally living the life I always wanted. And I wouldn't trade a single day of this life for all the safe and comfortable days I lived before. Because I discovered something precious. It's better to have a short but true life than a long but false one. And mine finally is true. Well, that was my story. If it touched you in any way, if it inspired something in you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your like and subscription help me continue sharing these stories that hopefully will make a difference in someone's life. And now, I'd love to know, which city are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing about the people who connect with these stories. Is there anyone from Ohio, my old home? Or maybe California, Arizona, Montana, places I now call home? Wherever you are, know that your presence here matters. Until the next story. And remember, it's never too late to start truly living.